pest management. Then what are companion plants? What is it? And then finally, my favorite companion plants. I've got quite a few. Ignore my husband in the back. I live in a small flat. Let's get started. So a little introduction to pests. So pests, what are they? So I'd like to remind everyone that pest is a very much a question of point of view. And it's an animal or a plant that's detrimental to human or things that we human care about, which are crops, livestock, and forestry. And that's quite well reflected if I show you this picture, which is, you know, good or bad. So a lot of people will say, oh, you know what, this butterfly is really lovely, but this is a wasp and clearly that's terrible. When actually it really very much is a point of view, because you might not know it, but this white butterfly is a cabbage butterfly, which will lay eggs on your cabbage, get them completely munched with lovely little holes like that. And if you've ever grown cabbage, you will have seen these. Whether a wasp can often be a parasitic wasp, which might consume some of your garden pests. So talking about pests is keeping in mind that this is a point of view, and some things that you might think are not bad, they're actually all bad. They're part of a much bigger system and might have a role to play beyond you harvesting your crops. So generally, and that's very general pest management tips. The three things you should be doing to manage your garden pest, and when I say manage, I really mean manage and not eradicate, because I think it's very, very important that your garden is an ecosystem that is balanced. And so as such, you want to make sure that you still have some insects in it, good and bad, because it's part of a wider ecosystem. So the three things I say is that you need to grow healthy plants, and that's very, very important. To know your common pest life cycle, what they look like, and recognize when is a good time to interact with that pest to remove it from your patch. And finally, use a mix of techniques to keep at bay all of the pests that you might find in your garden. And again, companion plants are one of these two, but you have many others. So I'll elaborate a little bit on those 3 points before going into companion plants. So growing healthy plants, you might think it's very straightforward, but let's not forget that plants have been on Earth for way, way, way longer than us. And so they have fine ways to manage the pests that consume them, simply because if you think about us human or other mammals, when we're threatened, we run away. Plants can't do that, and so they've created different and other ways to manage pests that might come and eat them, whether it's a cow that's about to munch it or a fungi that's about to consume it. So they have ways to deal with pests, and those ways are the most effective when the plant is strong and healthy. So what does that mean very practically for you in your gardens? So what you want to do is make sure that your soil is very healthy, that you use good compost, that you promote effective soil life in your garden that will promote good plant growth. And you might want to do that by using compost tea and worm cast and all sorts of different organic way to add life to your soil and keep your soil healthy. And the second point is you might want to plant out your seedlings later, which I know is very difficult now because we're all extremely excited. All of our seeds have germinated and we want to take them out. We've all made those mistakes. So what I would say is that keep your plant in a pot protected for a little bit longer until it is stronger and has almost more of a bark to it. So it's less easy to munch and consume. And that will help to have a healthy plant when you plant it out and to make it more difficult for pests to consume them. So that's the first part of a general management plan to grow healthy plants. The second part, for example, I just want to, so you probably know that this is a leaf miner. So if you've ever grown any type of leaf, you might have noticed this weird little bits on a plant, and that's what a leaf miner would do. And it's a kind of a tiny worm that lives in between two layers of the leaf. And so this, if the plant is healthy, it is very easy to just take away the leaves that are affected, dispose of them appropriately, do not compost them because they have something in them that's not good, the pest itself. And let the plants continue to survive. But if you've put out plants that's quite sad and already has almost the equivalent of a bad immune system, it's going to be much more susceptible to pests and might not survive them that well. The second way that is a general way of managing your pests, is to know their life cycle. And it's quite exciting, actually, very interesting. And I speak about that more in my next training session. But knowing the common insect's life cycle will really help you act at the right time. So, for example, on the bottom left here, you have the life cycle of a white butterfly. So the butterfly comes out, it will lay some eggs, the eggs hatch. At this point, nothing has been affected on your plant, but it will hatch. The eggs will be dropped onto your cabbage leaf. You hatch a lovely caterpillar. And those caterpillar are very, very hungry indeed, and they will consume vast parts of your cabbages. And then they pupate in this weird brown shape that you might find in your cabbage patch as well. And then another butterfly will come out. So the best way to kind of tackle that is to act right there before the butterfly lays eggs. So generally, if you understand the way pests behave and their life cycle, it might be much easier for you to tackle those pests better. Equally, on the right there, if you don't know what that is, this scorpion-looking thing, it's actually a larva of a ladybird. So that's actually extremely good for your garden. The more you have in your garden, the better your garden is. So please never kill those guys because they consume aphids or green and white flies in vast quantities. So you want them in your garden. And if you don't know what they look like and what they do, then you might make the mistake of removing them. So understand your pests, understand their life cycle. And then use a variety of techniques. Again, I don't like to talk about war against pests because, again, it's about a balanced ecosystem. But way to manage your pest is by using a variety of techniques, which I'm not going to go into details here. But if you come in the next training session late May, we'll go through all of these in detail. So the first one on the top list is the physical protection of your plants by rings and other methods that just stops pests from getting into your plant. The second point is you deter your pest or manually remove them, garlic spray, just physically going around and taking them off if you can. All that obviously depends on the size of your garden and the time you have, because if you have to manually get all the slugs out, that might be very long if you have a farm, so there's other ways. A third quite easy way still is to take away the pest's habitat. So here I've turned upside down a plant pots. And I don't know if you've done that before, but I can guarantee if you turn out 10 plant pots, at least 8 of them will have slugs underneath and possibly slug eggs as well. So taking away habitat for those specific pests is very, very important. Also know that not all slugs are bad. I want to point it out. And there's a couple of slugs that are actually very beneficial for the garden. So you need to know that to make sure that you don't remove the good guys. The fourth way that you manage your pests generally in your garden will be to attract pests, predators, so attract insects or animal that will consume what you don't want in your garden. And you will do that using the right food and the right habitat for these predators and using companion plants, which I'm going to go in more detail with. And finally, as a last resort, you can use biological control. And I've shown a picture of ladybirds because you can buy ladybirds that will come and consume your aphids, which is still accepted as an organic management of your pests. Nematodes for slugs also works quite well. Right, so let's have a look at those lovely companion plants. Who are they and what do they do? Right. So what are those companion plants? So companion planting in gardening and generally in agriculture is the planting of different crops in proximity next to each other for any number of different reasons, but that includes pest control, increased pollination, provide habitats for beneficial creatures and predators of your pest, maximizing the use of space, and generally increase crop productivity. So companion plants are basically plants that will help you increase the productivity of your crop. One of the way will be by managing your pests. So they're very, very good, and they generally happen to be very, very pretty. So I've created a full group. This is not scientific, this is my science, so don't go around saying this is scientific way. I've done it because that's how I see it. But in my opinion, there's 4 different ways you can classify your companion plants for group. So the first one, so there should be a little video, but here we go. So the first group is a general group that will support the plant growth and pollination. And obviously, if you're growing fruits like strawberries or apple, pollination is crucial, because without pollination, you will not get a fruit. And that's true for anything that has seeds in that you eat. So courgette, squash, pepper, etc., etc. So they support plant growth by providing shade and avoiding bare soil, which, as you know, is very important, because you don't want bare soil that will lose nutrients and water will go through, and it will also attract pollinator. An example here is anise hyssop, which is one of the best pollinator attractor. And it happened to taste really delicious. It's edible too. So I'll talk about this one. The second group is what I call the sacrificial plants. So there's plants which are preferred by the pests than your other plants that you're growing. So for example, this is nasturtium, which generally gets absolutely covered in aphids before the aphids attack anything else. So you can grow it wherever you don't want aphids to go, and then you remove them when they're covered and put them away. So those are the sacrificial plants. They don't last very long in a garden. Still, they're pretty. And then you have the plants that deter specifically pests. So they will actively stop pests from coming close to your crops through various ways that are sometimes very delicate and very interesting, like the French marigold. And I'll detail that a little bit later. And finally, you've got other companion plants that actually attract pest predators. So this here is the pot marigold or the calendula. And you can see that French marigold and pot marigold are completely different plants, completely different species. And if you only use the common name, which is marigold, you might not know what you're talking about. So I would say, if you are looking to buy specific plants, always use the botanical name underneath, because it will be the same everywhere. So Tagetes for your French marigold and calendula for your pot marigold. Right, so those are the 4 groups I've created of kind of companion plants based on what they do for your garden. So let's have a look at my favorite go-to companion plants. So the first one, unsurprisingly, is the French marigold, Tagetes patula. So they come from Mexico, they originate from Mexico, and they're actually widely used in agriculture because they deter pests and attract pest predators. They have a very long flowering season. So they will sometimes flower from even as early as May all the way to October, November, especially in London where it's quite warm. And how they work is that the French marigold root will exude a gas that will kill root-feeding nematodes. So root-feeding nematodes are tiny worm-like beings that you can't see with the naked eyes, that will kind of poke holes through the roots of your vegetable and reproduce within them. And they create a lot of different problems. So French marigold will deter those root-feeding nematodes. They also attract hoverflies, and hoverflies larvae, which are looking very ugly and nothing like a hoverfly, absolutely love eating aphids. So if you have French marigold, you're likely to attract a hoverfly that might lay eggs around there, and the larvae might consume aphids that are covering various plants that you have in your garden. And specifically, French marigolds are very, very good to be planted next to tomatoes because tomatoes can be quite sensitive to root-feeding nematodes. So that's kind of a partnership that works really well. So just to show you, bottom left, this is a root-feeding nematodes, and you can even see it's got like a spear inside its body there, and this brown thing is like a muscle that it shoots the spine, which is like a needle, into the roots and kind of consume the root and actually lay eggs within the roots. And then on the bottom right here, you can see a tomato root that has been affected by a root-feeding nematodes, and on the top you see what the tomato looks like when that happens. So not pretty, definitely not productive. And this, I put it there, you don't have to read it, but this is an official article for about the success of using French marigold to control root nematode in agriculture. So that's been done in India, and it's been proven to work really, really well. So it's not just hearsay. This is definitely something that our grandmother did, and they did it because it worked, and we now have the scientific proof that it works and why it works. So definitely French marigold should be in your garden. And you don't have to have the red one. There's lots of different colors. They're really fun to grow and quite easy to grow as well. Right, good old nasturtium, which I hope quite a lot of you already grow. Nasturtium is great because it happens to also be completely edible from the bud to the leaf to the flower, very spicy. I used to work a lot with children and I would always get them to try it out because it was fun. And they loved it, just to say. So nasturtium is typically one of those sacrificial plants. So you would plant it in a bit of your garden where you tend to have a lot of green and black fly that come around. So that could be your apple tree, that could be near roses if you're growing rose. And they tend to attract the green and the black fly, the aphids, away from your plants because they tend to prefer it. It's good with tomatoes. Apparently it improved tomatoes' taste. So I've been told that a few times, but I've not actually noticed anything. If anyone asks, just pop me a message in a chat box. I'd be interested to know. I've used them mainly as a sacrificial plant, and I've put them specifically underneath my apple trees because they were really riddled with aphids. And so the aphids tend to go on the nasturtium, and after a couple of weeks, they're absolutely covered, and I just took them away and bin them. When you do not compost a plant that's riddled with pests, because the compost won't kill your pests. It will be a lovely breeding ground for your pests, and then you just make more pests. So in the case of your sacrificial plant, you just need to make sure that you dispose of them appropriately in a bin bag, or if you have an incinerator, any fancy, you could do that too. So nasturtium are excellent anywhere aphids are a problem. They tend to germinate very well, and they tend to run very easily along the ground. So they can cover quite a vast amount of soil. If you're not sure if it works, you can look at the bottom of the leaves because that's where the aphid will start kind of gathering, and then you can see that it's working. And if you have no aphids, still grow nasturtium because they really do taste lovely. And nasturtium pesto goes a long way. Right. So you can see here the black flies at the bottom of a nasturtium leaf and on a bud. They absolutely love it for whatever reason. You can see on the photo bottom left, so the dark around are the aphids, and then you can see some like grayish weird bits. So those are dead aphids and shredding from aphids, so leftover are their former body. So that's quite interesting. It's often quite, if you have a microscope or a magnifying glasses, I would say go and have a look because it's always really interesting to look at these. I've put crocus here, but the early flowering crocus, because they're very important for early pollinator, which tend to be really useful as a gardener for when you grow apple and pear trees, especially apples, because some apples will flower really, really early, and even more if you have apricot and peaches. If you've got a really warm little bit of London there, and you're growing these, they flower extremely early. And so they're mainly pollinated by the very early pollinator, which tend to be queen bumblebees and some flies, because bees tend to not come out before it's 10 degrees. So crocuses, early flowering crocuses, provide a really rich nectar for those pollinator. And so by having them in your garden, not only they're really pretty and you have flowers really early, like in January, February, but also you feed your early pollinator, which in turn will hang out in your garden and pollinate your apple tree. So that's kind of a really nice one to use. So example here, you've got 4 different types. So bottom left, you've got a hoverfly. Top left, you have a bee. Top right, you have a thing that's a buff-tailed bumblebee. And bottom right, this is also a hoverfly, but a very different one. And you can tell it's a hoverfly because its eyes are touching at the top, contrary to bees, which have little hair at the top. There you go. A free tip to recognize them. Right, oregano or marjoram, which are very similar plants and can interchangeably be used in the kitchen and outside the kitchen. They are fantastic to attract pollinator. Bees and bumblebees and most pollinator, actually, most insects don't see the world like we do. They see it with very different eyes, and the color that they tend to be most attracted to are generally purple. And specifically oregano, because it flowers during a very long period of time. they tend to absolutely love it. And it tends to have lots of tiny little flowers, which are generally preferred because a bee or a bumblebee can spend a lot of time kind of going around from tiny flowers to tiny flowers. It's also perennial, so it will last for years and years. It can be hardy in London, which means it doesn't die off. It stays green throughout the winter. And you can put it anywhere in your garden. It's very good on pizza. I absolutely love it. And then you can find different type of colors of oregano. You can have anything from white to quite a dark red if you're looking for unusual things. The standard one will be this kind of light pink. And then you can see those are picture of butterfly. That's a wasp, but now we know not all wasps are bad. And I think this could be a bumblebee, but it also could be a solitary bee. And that's a honeybee, all on oregano. If you've ever grown it, you will have noticed that they absolutely love it. Pot marigold or calendula is also a fantastic companion plant. And if you're only going to do one, I would say this is the one you do, because it attracts a wide range of pest predators. So it's technically treated like an annual, but I have noticed, especially in London, it tends to survive the winter. And you sometimes have flowers throughout the winter, go marigold. And so it's really, really nice, really bright flower that goes from anything from bright yellow to quite a dark orange. And basically they attract hoverflies, lacewings, and ladybird. All the three of those insects, so hoverfly, lacewing, and ladybird, have larva stages before they get to the adult stage. And those larva stage will munch on aphids, your green and your black fly, liberally. A lot. They consume up to 100 a day. So that is a lot. So they're fantastic, and you want them liberally all over your garden, because they will function. You will see hoverfly being around them all of the time, and they will really help with managing your pests in the most natural way possible. There you go. Oh, I just wanted to show you. So top right, this horrifying thing is a hoverfly larva, and they come in lots of shape and forms. They're often quite see-through, hoverflies, so you can see their internal organ, and sometimes they look like a blob of like see-through thing, and it's really quite ugly, and they will consume aphids like there's no tomorrow. So you really want those guys in your garden. Bottom is a hoverfly actually laying its eggs. So if you're unsure, I would say always check online what the average egg of different insect look like, because you might want to destroy eggs of a cabbage butterfly, but you definitely don't want to destroy the eggs of a hoverfly. And then on the top left, this is a classic hoverfly. Hoverflies are a huge family. There's loads and loads of them that range from tiny flies to very big wasp-looking flies. So and they're all good, and all good for the garden. They're generally good, but they're good for the garden. And all of their larval stage will consume a vast amount of aphids. Good old mint, which not only is great because again it's edible. Oh, I forgot to say, your calendula, it's also something you can eat, and not only you can eat it, it doesn't taste amazing, I'll be honest with you, but it's very, very good if you make any beauty products. There is a bit in the heart of the calendula that's extremely good and soothing for the skin, and you might have heard of calendula cream. It's made with those guys, so you could like infuse them in oil and use that on your skin. So that's really cool too. Good old spearmint. So spearmint is the best one, but there's lots of different mints, and they will help as well, but spearmint is the best because it is the strongest. So what it does is that it deters pests, so it keeps pests away from your plants, and it attracts pest predators. So how does it do that? There's a compound found in mint oil, and it can confuse some pests. So for example, carrot root flies, some aphids, etc. They just don't quite know where to go once you've got a mint around. And especially they're good for flea beetle, which you might know if you've ever grown a soft brassica, like for example, your mustard green, and those sorts of things. They have tiny little holes in them, and when you pass your hand in them, you can see things jumping. Those are flea beetles, and they really don't like the smell of mint very much. So they're very good at kind of deterring or confusing those pests, which might not find what they want to eat. And then their purple flowers mint tends to have really bright purple flowers, attract again your pollinator. So it does a two-way, deters your pest and attracts pollinator and pest predators, which is very good. So again, your hoverfly, the predatory wasps, and the ladybird love the mint's purple flowers. So they'll come, lay their eggs, consume aphids. Very, very important. I can't stress that enough. Do not plant mint in the ground ever, unless you want an entire garden of mojito, because mint will spread and take over your entire garden. So the best way you want to do this is to have pots of mint, and you can move them around the garden and put them around your plants, or you can have a pot and put your pot in the ground with the mint inside of it. But still the mint will find a way out. So you do want to be careful. And I've made that mistake once and I'm not making it again. It's just, it goes everywhere. But have lovely pots of mint and move them around. It will work very, very well. And again, spearmint is lovely in tea, is lovely in desserts. So you can also eat it, which is always a plus. And finally, garlic chives, which you might see in the wild quite a lot at the moment. They're in season and they're absolutely lovely. And they smell garlicky, they taste garlicky, love them. And their strong scent actually confuses the carrot root fly, which, if you don't know the carrot root fly, is I've never actually seen the fly in action, but I've seen the result of the fly. So again, the fly itself is not the problem. It's the larval stage of the fly, which will dig kind of little holes in your carrot roots. And carrot root flies find the carrot through smell only, and they can smell carrots up to a mile away. It's pretty amazing for a fly. And the way you normally do it, like take care of this, is by planting your carrots straight in the ground, because the transplanting of carrots might create a smell to be kind of exuded as you move the root, and it's scent. And you might know as you've planted carrot, you can smell the carrot. So that might be an issue. Or you could put garlic chives around it, or you put a little protection around your carrots. But this garlic chives is edible and works quite well at deterring carrot root flies. So plant it alongside your carrot bed. It's a hardy perennial plant, which means it stays green over winter and it will grow for years and years. And then you can every so often split your kind of chunk of plants and make more of them. They're really lovely, so that's quite good. And this is what the carrot flies do. So at bottom right is one of the carrot flies. I think there's a few others that look very similar. And then if you've ever had kind of carrots with those kind of lesions on them, this is a carrot root fly larva that has just gone through it. And they can go up to the kind of the core of the carrot. When I have carrots like that, I personally still eat them. But sometimes the larva is still in the carrot. So good washing is always better. And wash everything in a little bit of like water and a bit of vinegar, because it tends to kind of clean your veggie, especially if you don't want to eat a larva. And that was all of my favorite companion plants. So I'm going to unmute. There you go. You're back, Elena.
Julie.
Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Here we go.
Thank you. We've had a couple of people asking whether the presentation can be made available. I don't think that's the case, but the recording will be made available if you're happy with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great. We can take some questions if people have questions for Julie. And the way it works, you might want to unmute yourself and try and ask the question. We're going to try and make sure that not everybody asks it at the same time. Julie, do you recommend any books?
Any books for general gardening or for companion planting? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's
imagine sort of pest management. Yeah, pests.
I have I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one, because a lot of book will either be on general gardening, and they might not have the technique that I've given you right now, or you have to look at books on organic gardening, and they will generally have a big chunk about managing pests. Now you have the little book of a guide to pests and guide to all sorts of different things, and those guides are quite good. They're kind of small, thinner books, because they give you really good pictures and how to recognize your pests, which is kind of the first step when you manage your pest is to find out what is actually consuming your vegetable. So those books are quite good for identifying, and then I would ignore the advice in it because it's generally not kind to nature. And then have a look. You've got very good blogs and online resources, and then some books on organic gardening will generally have a whole section on managing pests.
Okay, and then we have a question. I'm going to put together quite a few pests here. So what can we do with slugs and snails? Any plants that we can use? And then someone is asking about cats and foxes.
Okay, so slugs and snails. So first of all, they're two different species. So what you do that might get rid of one, might not get rid of the other ones. But generally in garden, the biggest problem are slugs. And they're generally not the very big slugs that you can see and physically remove. They're the tiny baby slugs, which are quite problematic. Let me just stop sharing my screen so you don't have to watch. There we go. So for slugs and snails, this is you need to have a mix of approaches, which would be to make sure you don't, you check under your pot, so you take away their habitats, to make sure you possibly have a space where hedgehog and things that consume generally slugs and snails can come and enjoy your garden and help you out with this. But if you have tons and tons of it, which can happen, I would suggest to use nematodes. So the nematodes you use for managing slugs naturally exist in the ground, so they're not something that's introduced. They're just a lot of those in one go. And what they do is that they would naturally infect the slugs. They infect the digestive systems of the slugs and then stop them from feeding. And so the slugs naturally die. While they die, they will feed your soil. And once there's no more slug to infect, the nematodes population will go down as well. So this is perfectly safe for human, for cats, for dogs, because again, they're naturally occurring nematodes. It's not a new thing that you add. And that works quite well. In the side of protection of your plants, I tend to use something, and I'm not being paid by them, but I use something that's called Slug Gone. And those are compressed wool pellets. So wool from sheep that are compressed. And I tend to put that as a matting around my plants. And then when you water it, it fluffs up quite literally. It smells a bit sheepy, just to warn you. It feels quite sheepy, but it will physically stops your plant, your slugs from being able to move because they can't move on some soft wool. At the same time, they will gently feed the soil by slowly decomposing over the course of a growing season. And then finally, if you have a small garden and time on your hands, rings, basic rings. So you cut plastic bottles and you put rings around your plants. Slugs tend to not like to go over the edge of a sharp end. So by putting rings, literally slides of plastic bottles around individual salad, for example, you reduce the risk of them coming over. Things like copper tape, sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't, and I don't really know why. I can't tell you, but those are the different techniques I would use for slugs and snail. Now for fox and cats, fox are attracted to garden, or sometimes fox are just assholes really. So they will come and just lay down in places and, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. If that happens, just try to watch their cubs because that's really cute. They can be really attracted in garden if you use a blood and bones fertilizer, which is an organic fertilizer, but it smells like blood. And so fox will come and try to dig that out. So that can be a reason why slugs are coming. So maybe don't use that kind of fertilizer. But I have no other tips for your garden. If the fox likes your garden, it is a bit difficult, and possibly it's about creating a space that they would prefer to your garden. So separate a bit of your garden and make it more fox friendly so they don't come into the bits of your garden you don't want them to come, which is the same approach I would have with cats. So cats hate lemons, very, very much hate lemons. If you have a cat at home, I suggest you put a lemon on the table and watch. It's very funny. It doesn't hurt them. They just really don't like the taste. So what you can do is use half-cut lemons, old lemons that you've used in your garden, where the soil is soft and where cats tend to come and scratch and poo, right? That's why we hate them. So in newly dug soil, you can put half lemon there and they tend to kind of not like this. Often it's not enough. So what I tend to do is grow catnip, or cat mint, which Cataria nipeta, which is a beautiful plant, very wildlife friendly, lovely purple flowers. And this is the heroine of cats. They will come around it, they will shoo it, they treat it's like a drug. It's not bad for them at all, but it will tend to attract them away from where you don't want them. So this is more push them or move them where you want them, as opposed to any other technique. But that's what I would do with cats. Also covering the soil, so making sure that you don't have a lot of soft and like fresh dug soil, because that's what cat like. That helps if you can. But yeah.
Right. We have 4 questions waiting, so let's go in order of how they make sense. Have you heard of rings of wood ash to deter slugs?
Yeah, I've heard of it. So I've tried quite a lot of things, and wood ash didn't quite work for me, because I also tried coffee and quite a lot of different things. The things with wood ash and coffee is that they also change the pH of the soil around the ring, and that might affect your plants. So if you were to use coffee around your brassica, for example, they really don't like acidic soil. So if you use a lot of it, that might become a problem. And wood ash are very alkaline, so that's kind of the other way around. It hasn't worked super well for me, but I would say if it works for you, use it. It's why you can use this as well as lots of other techniques, especially if you have the wood ash. Why not try it out?
Okay. How do we keep squirrels away?
Oh, squirrels. It's funny because they don't consume things, right? They just like digging stuff out. I've watched squirrel dig out like one by one all the garlic I'd planted just because they could. So with a squirrel, I would say it's physical protection. So if you just dug out garlic or bulbs of any kind, is to put the kind of very ugly, hard plastic net that you can buy sometimes that people grow sometimes peas on it, and is to put that on the ground to stop them from being able to dig in and get stuff out.
Right. And if you're growing on a balcony, what kind of pests should you expect?
On a balcony, well, you could basically have exactly the same as in a garden, surprisingly. Pests, I mean, the good and the bad stuff will find a way to come to you. I would say wood pigeon might be a problem on your balcony. And again, that's protection. So you might want to put netting around your things, or a picture of an owl or things like that. Sometimes they work surprisingly well. And then if you're growing in a really small place and in a balcony, you might not have that many slugs. But the thing is, often you bring the slugs in with the soil that you use, because slug eggs are tiny, round, see-through things that look really pretty. And you can often find some in your compost. So you might bring that in as well. So the good thing, if you have a small garden on a balcony, is that you can check it daily for things, and then as soon as you see something that's unusual, you can kind of take action towards it. And if it's slug, you can manually take them out. If it's aphid, you can treat it, etc., etc.
All right. And then we have a query. Have you heard of Mexican marigold being used to keep bindweed away?
Oh, okay. So the Mexican marigold, I'm assuming, is the French marigold, Tagetes patula, because it comes from Mexico. I have not heard of it. About so bindweed, if you don't know, is the kind of the most. Sorry.
Tagetes minuta. This is the.
Oh, minuta. Oh, it's the smaller version. Okay, very cute little plant as well. I have not heard of that. But you could always try it. I think bindweed are very much problematic, and it's basically bindweed. You manage bindweed by always being there and taking out the new growth, because they're very difficult to manage in an organic garden, because normally you would use glyphosate to kill them, and I personally refuse to do that because it's really not organic. But if planting that like Tagetes minuta help, then absolutely do it. I have no experience of it, so I can't tell you.
And we're going to take one last question to end on a bang. We're removing slugs. Where do we put them?
Yeah, good question. So tests has been done to find out how far away they need to go for them not to come back into your lovely garden. Turns out pretty far. So if you want to get rid of them properly, you need to walk them at least a mile away. I know. Someone
is saying that they put them on the road so that the birds eat them.
You can do that. So also if you have chicken, small slugs, they love it. So you can just put them in a box and kind of give them away. When I worked at Regent's Park, I used to put them in a rose garden because there's nothing for them to eat in the rose garden.
I'm going to take the last 2 because hopefully they're going to be quick, but then we're going to stop. So if you're planting your flowers near say that you're planting your calendulas near your tomatoes, how close do they have to be?
They can be pretty close. I mean, there's no limit. I would generally, so you can, if you plant in rows, you can put them on in between your rows, or at the front and at the end of your rows, or literally if you just have a pot with your tomato in it, you can put a couple of calendula in there. Not calendula, but pot marigold.
And someone started a container garden inside, brought it outside, and now they've got quite a lot of fungus. Is there anything they can do?
So fungus is very common. It will come from your compost probably. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It might mean that there's not enough air circulation, especially if you bought it from outside. It means inside there wasn't enough air circulation, and so probably spores have stayed in and kind of developed. Fungi are not necessarily bad, and I don't know enough about fungi to tell you exactly what to do, but I would say now that your container is outside, you're probably fine. So you can, if you can probably see the fruiting part of the
sorry, they're fungus gnats, little black flies.
Oh, black flies. Okay, so you would treat them like black flies. So for aphids, if you can attract pest predator, or you can use garlic spray, homemade garlic spray, which in my opinion works extremely well, which is a whole head of garlic with the skin. You bash it with your feet really hard, so you crush it. It needs to be properly crushed. Do not peel it. Do not be kind to it. Just bash it. A liter of boiling water. You let it cool down. You cover it while it cools down, so the steam, which contains all the garlic essential oil, doesn't kind of go away. And once it's nicely cooled down, you drain it into a spray through a cloth, because the little bits will be difficult if you leave them in. And then you use that liberally when you have aphids, gnats, all sorts of things, because they tend to either kill on contact or deter those pests. It also affects the good stuff. So a ladybird, for example, don't like it. So it's about a balance, and maybe if you have ladybird, move them before you spray or something like that.
Right. Julie, would you mind maybe sharing again the last page of your presentation with your details? Because we have someone asking whether you have an Instagram account, because, I quote, "You are a plant guru."
Thank you. Thank you, whoever said that.
There you go. So everybody's got Julie's. Do you have an Instagram account?
So I have. It's called Devon Adventures. If you go on my website, which is soandgrow.net, I do regular videos explaining stuff. I also write regularly about gardening during the month, and then you can see the link to my Instagram account there, and you can sign up so you can get my special tips in your inbox anytime.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much, Julie. Thank you everyone for taking part. If you want to hear from Julie more about your how to manage your pests, and I think it's called the Organic Gardener's Guide to Pest Management. Yeah. We will be back here on the 27th. In the meantime, please do have a look at the email that you're going to receive asking for feedback, and if you can afford a donation, we would welcome it. Julie has done this out in the free time, so it'd be great to be able to share some of our donations with our trainers. Someone is going off to make garlic spray. Excellent.
Great. Yeah. Garlic spray is my go-to. I always have some. Yeah, make sure that the wind direction is not towards you when you spray, because you will smell really bad.
Excellent. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
That was a session.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Julie. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
As people are leaving, we can do a quick debrief. Okay, who else do we have? If you want to stop screen sharing, Julie, we can see your pretty face again.
Sure.
Got a few other people that are still in, slowly leaving. That was amazing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've not done a lot of Zoom as a...
Okay, so we're gonna keep Fiona. Okay. I'm gonna try and remove the people who are not leaving. Okay, what do we have? Yvette. Okay. That's it, right? No, there's Lynn.
Yeah, that's fine. I've just removed Lynn. Apologies.
Okay, excellent.
Should we stop recording as well?
Yes. Okay. Just press